Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the lower bracket round 2 of the ETS Season 2 Invitational. Only have 3 more rounds to play. This will be one of those 3, and then we'll have 2 more to follow after that. Real quick, before we jump into our feature match between what is going to be Shed versus Unearthly, we are going to go over the bracket real quick. Last round, we had Mu2 winning 2-1 with Stonescar Khalees over Frost Riders Combri Aggro. We had Smoony 2-0 on stream with Xenon Killers over Rhymes Feln Control. We had Vomi 2-0 over Jarbo with Maulers over Jarbo's Khalees, rather. We had Unearthly 2-0 over Cyber Rage and having to play the Rakano Mirror for which Rakano deck could actually continue living. Unearthly got that 2-1, by the way. J Knight got won 2-0 over Flowshoe playing Armory versus Flowshoe's Feln Control. Alunga 2-0 with... what was Alunga? We already saw him earlier today. Did I skip writing him down? Oh, Visage Armory, of course. Yeah. Visage Armory over Callum Deer's Feln Midrange. And we had Swagson 2-0 with Burn Queen over Jito Queen. So that was the Queen Mirror, which are all the Queen decks, I believe, tournament. And we also had DD Ebbett or Thundershot rather, 2-1 over DD Ebbett with his 4-faction control.
Yeah, so it looks like exciting times.
Yeah, all the results of the matchups. You can follow along with everything we just said in the bracket on the Twitch. You should be able to see it at the bottom below the actual stream. There's the bracket there if you want to follow along with us at the top of every round. And jumping straight into this match here, Unearthly looking at his redraw, he's going to be on Rakano versus Shed. What I believe he is playing is just Stonescar midrange.
Yeah, it looks like a Stonescar mid-range deck. We have a decent amount of stuff going on. Looks like he's got Flame Blast in the opening hand and enough of the influence to cast it. Getting that triple red and triple purple for champion. Like once you have that, it's pretty easy sailing for Stonescar decks. That influence requirement is pretty tricky to get.
Yeah, very true. And we do see Shed with a clean answer to this Crownwatch Paladin. Relatively clean anyway. Like he can go ahead and pop the Aegis, which he does with the Varus Favor, and then torch it as a follow-up.
Yeah. So we have like a standard like Maulers list here. We have a lot of 2 torches out of Unearthly, so should be pretty effective against what Shed's playing down. There's a lot of early aggro coming out. Steward is a good blockade here, definitely stops some of Unearthly's aggro, and will trade 2 for 1, but we'll see if that's going to be enough to block all those Warcries out.
Yeah, we will see, and it looks like Earthly... Oh, interesting. He's going to opt to go ahead and double torch this, clear the path so he can get some more Warcry triggers down, and he can get some damage out.
Getting those Warcry triggers is real important. The more of those that you can set up, the better off your deck is in the late game when the Stonescar Maulers list starts to really take off.
Yeah, definitely. And we do see Shed picking up this stash. That's going to be very important for him later on. Definitely if he can find a weapon to go along with it, he'll have a lot of high-value targets to pull out of it.
That second Steward of the Past is just a death sentence. It's a real scary card against Rakano. Like, you just always get value out of it. It looks like this time around Finest Hour plus the silence from Valkyrie Enforcer is going to allow him to take care of it, but this is still pretty rough. Yeah. Only attacking with the 2/2 here, despite the Finest Hour.
I actually like that because Shed is representing the 1 power, and I think Unearthly might have seen that he had the prompt a couple times, like on his turn, since he ended with 1 mana at the end of his turn. I think he was prompted to go ahead and throw the torch off. So Unearthly, knowing that he's holding that, knows that if he goes to play the Finest Hour, he's going to get the unit torched in response if he tries to swing in with the Ronin.
Still giving it due consideration here, though, deciding whether or not he wants to hold the Finest Hour or throw it. He might just choose to take this and use the Finest Hour to pressure with Warcry units, although I think in that case, attacking with both units might have been the better play.
Yeah, very true. This is going to be an interesting turn for him. Like, he definitely... let's see what Shed's going to do here. Like, it would feel really bad to fire off this Flame Blast at, like, the Oni Ronin, but, like, there's also the possibility that you you might just have to at some point.
Getting rid of those Warcry triggers, always important. He has Smuggler Stash here, but not really anything to pull out with it, so he can get some of his units back, and the more of those Stewards coming back, the worse things are.
Yeah, the steward could be important, but we are just going to see this steward of the past that was silenced already get eaten up by the Crown Watch Paladin, and we see this big Pyro Knight come down. Pyro Knight 8/3 Warcry triggers, so she's a big old 5/4 now.
Yeah, Unearthly's play around the Crown Watch Paladin here has been super careful. I believe what he's been like looking for is not to get torched while finest towering like an Oni Ronin. And yeah, it looks like it's paying off okay for him. He's still got lots of pressure on the board. This Statuary Maiden, however, is really pulling its weight.
Yeah, it's definitely pulling its weight here, and it's like I wonder if you're shed if you just go ahead and block this here. Like I guess you kind of have to. Like you just kind of need to get this off the board, and
Yeah, I think
then
you definitely want to stall as much of the aggro as you can. If you can get Unearthly to the point where he's top decking, that's the point where the Mauler deck can really just take the game.
very true. And he's going to get a free turn here since Shed actually doesn't have anything like a Champion of Chaos or like an Argenport Instigator, something low enough for him to actually weave it in. Obviously, 2 powers, so he can't get the Champion of Chaos in, but like an Argenport Instigator would have been a nice pickup.
There's a significant amount of extra damage there, to be sure. Shed, of course, has very good blockers to lay down. Steward of the Past is going to be quite solid. Should even block the Champion of Glory. And Statuary Maiden just wrapping everything up and turning it into cudgels. Pretty nasty. You don't really want to play either of those cudgels if you don't want to make yourself vulnerable to Vanquish, but by and large, looks like he's in a pretty strong position.
Yeah, he is. He's probably going to be playing like a little bit of a slower game here, just taking his time. Not pressured to do anything here particularly.
Yeah, I really like these stewards over Statuary Maidens and Stonescar Maulers lists. They're just really good against Rakano decks because they're just under Vanquish range and they're well over Torch range, and they tend to block even like a unit with a couple of Warcries on it. Can be pretty rough. Shed considering putting Stone Cudgels on his Statuary Maiden here. That does make it vulnerable to Vanquish, but it also makes it a much better blocker against Finest Hour.
Yeah, very true. Electing not to do it though, and we did just see a couple turns of pass back and forth, and Unearthly unfortunately just hitting a lot of power right now. 3 straight power top decks in a row.
The stall's been pretty good for Shed. He gets to develop a lot more stuff, and of course, the Cabal Countess swinging in. Basically, Unearthly needs a Torch or a Vanquish to answer that, and he kind of wants to hold on to those so that he can play tricks around the blocking units.
Yeah, interesting little interaction there. Shed actually probably should have dropped that Argenport Instigator before he did, to make sure that if Unearthly wanted to block with one of his units, he was punished for it. Not a big interaction, but it can matter sometimes.
Yeah, on occasion. A deep forged plate coming out on a quick draw unit. This is a really, really nasty turn of events for Shed. It's going to be pretty hard to get rid of this, and he has to block enough of the damage that he can actually live while still putting up enough pressure to win on his own, which is going to be even harder now that he's actually used those 2 cudgels or used one of those 2 cudgels. He can't generate a 10-1 quick draw. So yeah, this deep forged plate just puts that unit well out of range for Shed.
Yeah, he's gonna have to eat it something here. I mean, he can afford to take it for 1 turn, but after that 1 turn, that's all he's got.
And that puts
Um,
you in torch range too, which is really, really scary.
yeah,
Ends up throwing the Statuary Maiden away.
yeah. Shed needs to find something like maybe like a Death Strike. Like I have to imagine he's running at least a couple in the board.
If he has another steward, then he can quadruple block and still manage to get lethal because he'll only be able to kill 2 of the units, and one of the remaining units will either have Death Strike or enough power to kill him. But it looks like he's in a lot of trouble here.
Yeah, and with that Vanquish picked up, I'm almost positive that's lethal. In fact, yeah, it is. All he has to do is vanquish one of either the 5/5 or the 5/7, and then just go ahead and push with the 10/10. In fact, if he vanquishes the 5/7 because Shed has the Argenport Instigator, he'll go down to 4, and then he has lethal just swinging the 10/10 with the Overwhelm.
Yeah, Deep Forge Plate swinging the game. Very, very powerful weapon.
Yeah, that's exactly what Unearthly needed there. He hit a lot of power in his last 5 or 6 draws, but that Deforge play really coming in the clutch there and making his unit big enough that he could just push through and finish that game.
Yeah, Stone Scar Ballers tends to run very little removal for units that are above that 6 health cutoff. You have your Obliterates, you have your Stone Scar Mauls, of course, but you rarely run things that are in the range like Death Strike. There's probably there may be as many as 3 Death Strikes. I actually can't see the deck list at the moment.
Let's just go ahead and pull it up and take a look at the sideboard, in fact. Get the deck list up and the sideboard. I'm noticing a couple of Ruins, a pair of Suffocates, an Annihilate, 2 Plagued, a Furnace Mage, 2 Steward of the Past, 3 Infernal Tyrant, an Azendal's Gift, and a Vara. So not crazy unstandard, I would say. Like these are pretty average pulls for a Stone Scar type list.
Yeah, we're seeing the Ruins instead of the Furnace Mages. This is a move that was popularized by Vami last week, I believe, and one that I think is actually pretty much correct in most instances. Usually get to get a lot of like fast removal out of this, and you can basically just get a trick out of it. So you get some of the same advantage that you might get out of actually playing a unit with Furnace Mage because you get to play it as a combat trick.
Yeah, very true. We can see instances like we saw with Vomi taking it out with the Ruin, where a player goes in to play a weapon, commit its swing. In fact, Shed himself, I think, a couple weeks ago when he won, I want to say, was actually won with the exact same trick, like playing Ruin and ruining away a weapon that got played. Those it's just like a massive. It was like a 10-9 sort of Akari, I want to say, and he had the Ruin. So definitely a big proponent himself of playing Ruin in the sideboard.
Yeah. So both of those decks, like definitely like running the Ruins, getting a lot of value out of them. Unearthly looks to be siding out his Sword of Icarias, which is an interesting play.
Yeah, speaking of siding out those sort of Icarias, let's see what he might be bringing in their place. We've got 4 Protects, 2 Ruins, a Vanquish, 3 Assembly Lines, 3 Righteous Furies, a Deforged Plate, and a Soulfire Drake. Now, that's an interesting card that I actually don't think I've seen in Rakano before. Have you ever seen a Rakano player play Assembly Line against you?
It's pretty rare, but it does happen on occasion. It's a really good way to set up a defensive board, which is really nice. Occasionally, you do want that sort of go wide. It's an interesting sideboard choice to be sure, but we'll see how well it does against all of the Overwhelm units and, of course, the Stone Scar Mauls. It could end up being very, very good, but we will see.
Yeah, we will see. Do you think you're bringing Protect in here as the Rakano deck? I feel like you got to bring at least like a couple of them in, maybe.
Yeah, it looks like Finest Hours. At least 3 of the Finest Hours are coming out, and he's bringing in more Protects. I think that's an interesting choice to be sure. It means that you have less answers to Steward of the Past and Statuary Maiden, but more answers to Obliterate and Torch, which are the cards that really just clear out your Warcry units. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, very true. Notably, the Finest Hour is counter to Torch, so I'm kind of with you. Like, I'm gonna go with Unearthly here since he's been playing a lot more of this game and a lot longer than me, and he is known as the resident Rakano player. But it does feel a little bit interesting to be pulling out the Finest Hours. They do actually seem relatively useful in this matchup.
They can be very, very strong against Torch. They can be very strong against like even like the Obliterates if your unit is big enough. And
Yeah,
we'll see how that goes. All right, heading into game 2 here. Shed with an opening hand that's decently strong. Can't quite get that on curve Champion of Chaos as a 4/4, but he does get to play at least a 3 power. So there's a lot of potential strength here.
yeah, it's possible he will have that on curve if he can top deck another Sigil, but he is looking like he's going to get to play it. Unearthly having the Torch to go ahead and respond to this Argent Port Instigator.
hmm Yeah, you usually try and hold on to Champion of Chaos in these matchups, depending on what you're doing. If he's already seen a torch, he might feel pretty brave about throwing out Champion on time, but he has to use Annihilate this turn to clear out the Warcry, so he won't be playing anything on 3.
Yeah, which is interesting. Unearthly having 2 Soulfire Drakes too. These could prove to be fairly interesting cards here.
Unearthly passing a turn here, which definitely favors Shed. Like, if the aggro stops for even a little bit, there's a chance that Shed can pull this out pretty easily.
Yeah,
We
very
have Champion coming down.
yeah, very true. He could pull that out. Here's an interesting interaction for you, Pojo. I'm actually not familiar since I don't play Maiden often. Does Statuary Maiden stop Entombs from going off?
Statuary Maiden does stop Entombs from going off. It turns them into cudgels, and they just don't get to do anything. So, pretty effective way to cut the Entombs out of the deck. Steward can be a little bit more reliable at that, but Statuary Maiden is just a fine answer if you have it.
Yeah,
Red, however, passing the turn here.
yeah, very true. He does have both down, so even if Unearthly can find an answer to one of them, these Soulfire Drakes can eventually get cleaned up. That being said, Unearthly with the two Soulfire Drakes is just starting to push a lot of damage right now.
Steward answers one of the Soulfire Drakes, and there's a lot of damage being pushed, but as long as Steward is down, Shed is somewhat protected. Like, you don't get the double charge, double flying. It's just a matter of whether or not Unearthly can reduce Shed to 0 before bad things happen.
Yeah, and he's trying his hardest to do it right now. Like, and he's doing a pretty good job. Like, he's got Shed down to a 2-turn clock, and Shed's gonna need to find that's not an untapped sigil, fortunately.
Yeah. Stone Scar Maul will help here if Unearthly doesn't have the torch in hand, but it's gonna be pretty close, and Valkyrie Enforcer should probably seal it up.
Yeah, very true. This Valkyrie Enforcer, if he goes ahead and plays it this turn, will put a lot of damage in play for next turn. And with the Maul dealing, the Maul has 3 armor, so he'll take 2 damage, so he will be at 3, and he'll have protect. He'll have protect power up to hold it up. So
Yeah, Torture Bust and didn't get it. So looks like a very quick 2-0 for Unearthly.
yeah, this is gonna be a very quick 2-0 out of Unearthly. And not too unsurprising, Rakano, a very quick deck. It did what it wanted to do there. Interestingly enough, like it had much more of a slow start than we expect out of Rakano. Like we expected to just be blazing fast, Oni Ronin into Crown Watch Paladin, into Valkyrie Enforcer, into your Warhammer to just buff the units up and just run your opponent over. But instead, we just saw a pair of Soulfire Drakes kind of getting it done there.
Yeah, once you get into those like mid-range sideboards, Rakana becomes a lot tougher matchup for the slower decks because you don't really want to let those war cries persist in the early game. But as we saw, like Shed spending that Annihilate early on meant that he didn't have answers for Soulfire Drake later. So there was just a lot of rough times for Shed.
Yeah, hard matchup for him. He unfortunately just didn't find a lot of his answers. Like that's what you're playing against when you play Rakano. Like if they actually hit like a solid draw, they hit a nice balance of power to the units they want to play. They can just get up under you and just beat you down. And we saw an example there where 2 Soulfire Drakes in play is providing enough damage. Like it forced the second Soulfire Drake forced the Death Strike onto it, and then he was able to just create a clock with the single one.
Yeah, if you can get like the correct answers as well, like the Vara's favor into the torches for Crown Watch Paladins, if you have just exactly the right stuff for exactly the right times, then that matchup goes a lot differently. I think in general, Shed just ending up stalling out until Deep Forge Plate came down was really, really rough for him round 1. And round 2 was just, that was a really, really good curve. There wasn't really much that you could do about that.
Yeah, no, there really wasn't almost anything you could do about that there. I think Shed might have been alive in that game if that he top decked a banner right at the end. Well, I guess it wasn't a banner because he had a unit in play, so it must have been a seat. Yeah, a seat, and he didn't have the sigil, so it came in depleted, which actually did make a big deal because it delayed him one more turn playing that Stone Scar Maul, and that Stone Scar Maul could have helped get him back in the game, clearing out the Soulfire Drake in the air. But unfortunately, playing it one turn too late with the Valkyrie Enforcer behind it to back it up provided him exact lethal.
Yep, and Stone Scar Maul is always kind of the rough draw against like the big 5 damage units. Like you want to get the obliterates there instead of the Stone Scar Mauls. Like Stone Scar Maul has a lot of use against like the more control oriented matchups, but when you're facing against a lot of aggro, you want to get like the more spell oriented answers, and then get the Stone Scar Mauls for the 2/2s and the 1/1s.
Yeah, exactly. You would much prefer to have another Death Strike or an Annihilator, anything there. And it's interesting. We saw the Steward, we saw the Statuary Maiden both counter the Soulfire Drake excellent, but the one thing that they don't counter is just the keyword flying, like flying over his units.
Yep, it's true. Unearthly had some very, very good sides there. Pushing in like extra mid-rangey stuff, making sure that he had like a decent amount of protection. Like the double Soulfire Drake, he did he side in the third Soulfire Drake as well? Those ended up being extremely effective.
Yeah, I have to imagine he brought in the third Soulfire Drake there. Other things to note, like he did have that protect, and like even though we didn't see it get used in that second game, like it was always sitting there from like 5 or 6 turns. Or I don't think it was that close, but he picked it up fairly early, and like it just sat in his hand. It was just this is protection. Like any spell based threat that would have been played against him would have just been immediately countered. And again, like another tempo swing that probably would have just been too much for Shed to overcome. If that protect had been up when Shed had tried to death strike the Soulfire Drake, that would have just been the game right there.
Yep, Protect ended up being a very, very good sideboard. You can obviously have like the finest towers as well, but being able to protect against Death Strike and being able to protect against Ruin is really nice. I think that like overall, Unearthly's deck just has enough mid range stuff to really push through and get the damage there.
Yeah, definitely. It's a showcase of like Rakano. Like I'm surprised more people don't bring Rakano to tournaments because while you can sideboard against it and while it does have bad draws, you can just roll over people. Like it's so easy to just roll over people with Rakano. Like you pick up a solid draw, like closer to what we saw in game 1 where he had the 1 drop, he had the 2 drop. It just rolled straight through him. He can't do anything about it.
Yeah, if you can get the right cards in the right order. I mean, Rakano can be just a really, really tough setup. It's the same with Stone Scar Maulers. Both of these decks have really, really good aggressive curves. And if they don't hit those curves quite correctly, then that can be pretty awkward and strange for them. This time around, Unearthly's deck just had a little bit more reliability, and Shed's deck just didn't have quite as much.
Yeah. Big props to both these players though. Sad to see Shed have to go home with his Stone Scar Maulers list. Was hoping more Maulers could make a representation. Pojo, I know that's your little brainchild, but
Yeah, I knocked a few of them to the losers bracket already. We'll see if any of them come back.
well, hopefully they do. But once again, big shout out to Shed. Uh, very very excellent player. Sad to see him go out this early, but it is what it is, unfortunately. We have to continue on. But Unearthly, another very good player, going and advancing on further in the losers bracket.
Yeah, that
And
leaves some Rakano representation in the tournament, which is good news for
yeah, these
diversity.
these players have a long climb. They have a long climb, but they're just getting started. We're going to be eliminating at least another, should be like 16 people, 12, I think. Yeah, we'll have 12 more people go out before the end of the day. So we'll have cut the list down from 32 all the way down to 8.
Yep.